Welcome back into the Mental Game. I'm your host, Brandon Saho, and this week's guest is Browns legend Joe Thomas. He's a future NFL Hall of Famer and an overall great dude, so I'm so excited to share this conversation with all of you. In this episode, we talk to Joe about his legendary career, his love for the city of Cleveland and Browns fans, but then we also dive into what it was like for him to experience 10 straight losing seasons and why he finally decided to start seeing the team psychologist in Cleveland with the Browns. All of that and much, much more in this amazing episode with Browns legend Joe Thomas. But before we get started, I want to go ahead and apologize for this mustache. If you're watching on YouTube, it is a Houday stash. The Bengals are undefeated since I started growing it, so I'm not allowed to shave this mustache until they lose. Back to Joe Thomas. Before we get started with the podcast episode, let's kick things off with this week's mental health tip of the week, powered by 1 in 5. It's important to exercise both our bodies and our minds. Time spent outside can be very refreshing. Going for walks, jogging, and playing with your kids are great ways to get outside. If the weather is bad, going to the gym, walking on a treadmill, or simply doing exercises and stretches in your living room are all awesome ways to stay active physically. To stay mentally active, we can read, journal, try out daily puzzles, play games, and think introspectively. Keeping our bodies and minds active feels amazing and positively impacts our mental health. And if you or someone you know needs help finding a therapist or any mental health resources, go ahead and scan the QR code right here in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. It'll be up the entire episode, and it'll take you directly to 1 in 5's homepage, where their mission is to prevent suicide by stopping the stigma and starting the conversation. Now it is time for the latest episode of The Mental Game with an amazing conversation with Browns legend Joe Thomas. Welcome back into The Mental Game. I am joined today by Browns legend, future NFL Hall of Famer. I'll say it here first. You just got put on the ballot. It's going to happen sooner rather than later. Joe Thomas. Joe, I appreciate you for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks for coming into Mi Casa here and making it easy on me. You drove all the way from Cincinnati last night.
Like 7.5 hours to Wisconsin.
No big deal.
Yeah, it was all right. I got my the famous place for brats down on campus.
Yeah, State Street Brats.
Went there
Great
for lunch
spot.
today, got a T-shirt, so
Absolutely.
I'm all Wisconsined out here. First thing I ask everyone when they come on this podcast is, what does mental health mean to you? So what does it mean to you, and how have you been able to use it as a tool for yourself throughout your personal and professional career?
I've never really thought about what mental health means, but I know the importance of mental health in my own life. I used sort of trying to control emotions and your brain and what your thoughts wander to when I was playing. And I think that was one of my big benefits and big advantages over my opponents. You hear a lot more guys talking about it in today's NFL, about how they're using meditation, they're using their brain, they're trying to learn to teach their mind on where they want it to go. And to me, that's a huge advantage in training, in performance, to be able to be at your best in the most critical moments. And I don't think it was something that really people talked about it a whole lot. I didn't hear a lot of players talking about it, but I picked it up from yoga. Being able to kind of control your thoughts and your emotions, and found that it was a big advantage in the moments in the game where I had to be at my best. I was able to calm and quiet my mind and focus on little things. And I think it gave me a huge advantage. I'm glad I played 10 years ago before everyone else knew about it.
You talked about it not being maybe at the forefront when you played for the Browns. Did you feel that like kind of tough guy, can't talk about it, just go and do it when it comes to mental health? Because really in the last, 5 to 10 years, it's become prevalent, whether it be sports, business, wherever in the world. Did you feel like it was kind of maybe, I don't know if looked down upon, but you felt maybe weak if you talked about it back then?
Yeah, I think talking about emotions was correlated with weakness back in the early 2000s NFL and everything beyond that, really.
Right.
Nobody really wanted to open up about how they were feeling. It was just like, suck it up, go out and do your job. And In some regards, I think that's an important message to understand that, everybody's got things that they're going through. That doesn't mean that it should be a crutch or an excuse, but at the same time, having an opportunity to talk about it, having somebody that you feel like you can bounce ideas off of, or just let them know, like, hey, I'm not feeling great today. Like, can you lift me up? Or just nothing else, just having a sounding board, somebody that's just willing to listen, and for you to be able to express your emotions and let somebody know how you feel can be incredibly healing and can be a way of helping just kind of pull you out of whatever you're feeling in that moment.
You mentioned yoga kind of being a way for you when you played to keep your mind, clean, straight. But you played one of the toughest positions there is in football. You're in the trenches. You played over 10,000 straight snaps for the Browns, 10-time Pro Bowler, like I said off the top. Where did you get that mindset to just keep going, keep working, have that tough, nasty mentality?
So I think I got that from my dad.
Okay.
Raised in Brookfield, Wisconsin, a couple parents in the house, and they had a big influence on the value system that I was raised with, morals, and how I went out and played sports. So for me, loyalty was a big thing. My house, toughness, hard work, dedication, commitment, dedication not only to yourself and your sport, but to your teammates, and a reliability of showing up there. My dad, he made like 20 years in a row and never missed a day of work. And one day in Milwaukee, they had like 16 inches of snow, and there was never a decision in his mind, should I or shouldn't I go? It's just, you just do it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the big hurdles that a lot of guys struggle with, is they have to decide, should I or shouldn't I do everything the coach tells me, or everything that's on my workout sheet, or do I finish the rep all the way?
Right.
And I think one of the best things you can do as an athlete is take that decision-making process out of your head and just do it, because then you don't have to think about it. So my dad, 16 inches of snow, he wasn't thinking, should I or shouldn't I go to work? He's like, it's a Monday. I don't care. I got to go. Like, there's not a decision to be made. I don't have to beat myself up over it.
Yeah.
I put the cross-country skis on and I go to work. I ski 10 miles through the snow and I get there because that's just what I do. And I think that was ingrained in my brain and just who I was from an early age, that you just show up, you don't even think about it. And for me, not missing a start in football in my entire career until I tore my tricep tendon in year 11, that goes back to 7th grade. It was a matter of, I'm just going to play until I can't, and I'll know when I can't.
Yeah.
You see so many guys today that they come out of the game, every little bump and bruise, and they have to have the doctor check it out to tell them it's okay.
Yeah.
It's like they need that feedback from a doctor to say, yeah, you're fine, you can keep playing, rather than my approach, which was just, I'm going to just go play.
Right.
And like my
Figure it
body
out
will
later.
tell me
Yeah.
when I can't do it anymore. And when I tore my tricep tendon, like I knew I tore my ACL in the bowl game my junior year in college. I knew I tore my ACL and I wasn't going to be able to play. But there was plenty of other moments I was hurting, but I knew that I should probably try. And then I tried, and then I realized I can still do this. And I can do it at a high level. So I might as well keep playing, because I owe it to the guys around me to give my best when I'm still available.
You were just inducted earlier this year into the Browns Legends Club. Congrats, by the way, on that. That's a big accomplishment. I remember listening to that press conference. You talked about how when you were a rookie, you said you wanted to be a Pro Bowler and you wanted to be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Did you have any idea when you said that you were going to do that? I mean, you're not in yet. You're on the ballot, first time being eligible. But looking back, however many years ago, 15 years ago, to think about that kid saying that right then to now being where you are on the doorstep of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, how do you wrap your mind around that?
Yeah, I don't. That's the key, is I don't really think about it, other than people that are already asking me about, like, hey, what's the party going to be like? Have you thought about your speech? Can I be invited? Can I bring a friend? And all this stuff. I'm like, dude, I'll think about that when I'm even maybe a finalist. I'll let my brain kind of wander in that direction, but I'm happy just being involved in the process right now. And the great thing about the Hall of Fame, from my perspective, is I've always been a guy I think about what I can control and what I don't control.
Right.
And I don't worry about stuff I don't control. I don't control what happens with the Hall of Fame. The work's already been put in, so I can just kind of enjoy the process right now. But going back to my rookie season, I remember in the media asked me like what were my goals for my career or whatever, a generic question from the local media. And I was like, well, I'd like to try to become the starter, and then I'd like to be a Pro Bowler, and then I'd like to make the Hall of Fame. And, those are individual goals.
Yeah.
And they looked at me, they're like, whoa, these things don't exactly belong on the same call sheet. Like, you want to be a starter? Well, you're going to be a starter, dude. You're the 3rd overall pick. Even if you stink, they're going to let you have a chance to start. And then Pro Bowl, okay, we get that. But like, whoa, let's slow down on the Hall of Fame stuff. But I'm like, hey, that should be everyone's goal.
Oh, and you speak it into existence. You dream big. Now, me being on the other side of that, interviewing players when they come in and someone says that, of course, they're going to give you a look like as a local reporter. I don't know. Hall of Fame, let's
pump the brakes
a little bit. You mentioned things that you can and can't control. Let's go through your career in Cleveland. You are one of the all-time greats with the Browns. Not as many wins as you wanted when you were there. On the mental health side of things, how tough was that playing through years where you guys were struggling in the win column?
I would say early on in my career, I did a really good job of focusing on the things I can control and not allowing things that were out of my control to like really upset me, get into my mental makeup and affect my own preparation. Because I was a firm believer from the Belichick school, because my first two head coaches actually were from the Bill Belichick tree, Romeo Crennel, Eric Mangini. And they were good about kind of teaching you that the best teammate you can be is the one that focuses on yourself and becomes the best version of yourself.
Yeah.
Because if everybody has that mindset, then everyone's going to be the best version of themselves, which makes the best team. But what they've said is that they've seen a lot of guys, you start worrying about what the quarterback's doing, you start worrying about what the DB is doing. All of a sudden, you're not worrying about the only guy that you can control what he does out there on the field.
Yeah.
And then your own play slips. And I think then there becomes like this diffusion of responsibility a little bit within the team. Like, oh, it's a lot easier to point fingers because the quarterback's not throwing the right passes or like the running back didn't hit the right hole. Then everyone, you take a little relax, deep breath with your own preparation, and you're not as focused as you should be. And I just think that you got to focus on what you can control. And it wasn't until later in my career where I started like, it affected me a little bit more because I think after, 100 plus games, my last 10 years, we had losing records every year.
Yeah.
I convinced myself going into every year that this was our year, we could do it. And you kind of build up this fantasy in your head. Like, the quarterback we got, he's going to develop into a stud, and we got this great defense. And because as a competitor, in order to get the best out of yourself, you got to believe that you can go win the championship.
It's a mental game just for you.
It's a mental game, right? So you're subconsciously convincing yourself that this is the team and you're going to be able to do it. And then that's what you do during the season every week. It's like your coaches put out the game plan, then they install the game plan, they teach it to you, practice it, and by the end of the week, they try to reinforce why this game plan is better than your opponents, and then you're ready to win. And so I'd bought in for 11 years. And then in my 11th season, I remember going into the Patriots game. I really hated the Patriots because they beat our ass a lot. We only, I think, beat them once in the, 8
They were
times
kind of good.
They were pretty good. So I give them credit. But like the fact that we kept getting these Patriots coaches and they kept stinking and we kept stinking made me hate Belichick even more. And then the fact that Brady kept winning all these Super Bowls and everyone acted like there was some like magic potion when I'm like, it's Brady. Yeah. Like Belichick's the greatest coach of all time.
Right.
But when you got that quarterback, that kind of helps. Like, let's go here, people. But so I was like, oh man, we really got to beat him. And we had the game plan installed. We practiced it. And I was like, yeah, we got him. Like, we're going to smoke these dudes. And of course, spoiler alert, kids at home, we lost by like 40. Yeah. And I remember being in the car on the way home after the game, and I just started breaking down and crying. I was in the passenger seat. My wife was driving, and she knows because she was a college athlete. Like, don't ask too many questions after a game because
let it sit.
You need a little cooling off period. There's a lot going through your mind. And
so,
but she saw me cry, and I don't think she ever saw me cry after a game. And I'd had plenty of bad games. So she was like, what happened? Did you like have a bad game? And I was like fighting back tears. I'm like, no, actually I played a perfect game. I didn't have a single mistake, which like never happens. And she's like, well, why are you so upset? And I'm like, because I just can't handle the losing anymore. And I was just like, crying, and I was like, it's affected me to a level of like my manhood. And the fact that I feel like I'd been like kidding myself all along, and like, it finally hit me in the face that we weren't any good and we weren't going to win any games. We ended up going 0-16 that season. So I was right about that. Yeah. But like it broke me a little bit, and she was great about it. She was like, maybe you should talk to somebody within the Browns because they have psychologists available to talk to. So then we went in on Monday, and I had a chance to pull our psychologist aside and said, hey, we'd love a chance to just talk to you. And, we started talking about all the things that were in my mind and like what was going on. And it was amazing walking out of there. It's not like he waved the magic wand or had like a magic sponge, but just that opportunity to talk to somebody about how I was feeling, I felt a lot bit better about that.
Well, we all have moments that break you or take a shot at you. Did you feel like that car ride was the biggest moment for you that really broke you or hurt you, just because of the realization of, shit, this isn't going how I thought it would?
Yeah, exactly. That's what it was. It was the realization that I'd been fooling myself, and that the losing was killing me, because you put everything you have every week and then you convince yourself you're going to win, and then you let yourself down. And I think that car ride was like that breaking point where I realized that I couldn't do it myself. I couldn't keep it inside anymore, and I needed to talk to somebody. And my wife was always a great sounding board for being able to talk about my feelings and emotions and stuff. But I felt like this one needed maybe a little bit more professional help, because I was really messed up. And I ended up talking with the team psychologist like 3-4 more times. And it was amazing just how great the perspective that person gave me was, and how much that helped me when I did deal with similar issues like that.
Would you say that you had any type of depression, anxiety, or what were they able to kind of help you with to power through that moment?
Yeah, I didn't ever feel like a lot of anxiety or maybe clinical depression. I would say intermittent depression, just because of how the season was going, and like how every loss was like snowballing and making me feel even worse. And the feeling of not having control, because I was personally playing good football, like winning football. And it's hard, as good as I was early on in my career, blocking out the noise, the record, all those things. It just got to the point where it was just too much for me, because I was blocking out things I didn't control, but I couldn't block it out anymore. And it was finally affecting me.
Did you see that feeling grow? I mean, I'm sure you saw it throughout your career when you guys were losing year after year in the locker room, but that specific year, do you remember seeing certain guys, and you don't need to name names, but seeing certain guys go through similar stuff of like, they just felt beat, like they couldn't do anything anymore?
Yeah, I saw the coaches go through that, and I saw the veteran players do that. I think the benefit of being a young player in the NFL is you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so we had a lot of young guys that didn't know what they didn't know. And, they hated losing too, but they're just happy to be in the NFL.
They're on a rookie contract. They're still going out this weekend. Like
it doesn't affect their life as much. But when you get old, like, it's like family, and then how your team's playing.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, you don't go out. You don't really have a whole lot else going on. And so for you to just constantly be dealing with that losing, especially when you feel like you're putting everything you have into it, and the performance is there on your side of things, only to have those losses just over and over and over again, it just compounded in my head.
I know this is kind of a loaded question. I'm not asking you to dog the Browns, but why do you think things never clicked as a team during your career? I mean, you guys had a couple decent years, but why do you think, big picture-wise, it didn't click for that decade?
The NFL is such a quarterback-driven league that you need to really have that all-pro type quarterback to be able to consistently compete.
Yeah.
And if you don't, like, you basically have to be perfect everywhere else to be able to win a game. And doing that 16 times over in a season, it's just not going to happen. You may win a few games.
Right.
Defense plays well. Maybe a couple skill guys make some plays. Maybe you run the ball well a few weeks. But overall, like, you got to have that quarterback that can make plays on third down, that can make plays in the red zone, and that can make plays at the end of the half and into the end of the game. Because even those seasons, my last two, that we were 1-15 and 0-16, we were losing some pretty close games. So the margin of victory and defeat is not that great in the NFL, even when you're talking about Tom Brady versus rookie quarterback that we had.
Yeah. You, your career, though, you were one of those staples in Cleveland. Those fans, I mean, I'm from Cincinnati. We had a lot of losing seasons before the Bengals went to the Super Bowl this past year. What did it say about the loyalty in that fan base to stick with you guys? Did you feel like they were part of you when you were in those low years? They stuck through everything.
Absolutely. By the way, I was cheering for the Bengals in the
There
Super
you go.
Bowl
All right.
because I feel there's like a little brotherly love and understanding of the circumstances with that loyalty surrounding a losing franchise. But I don't know. I think for the Browns, one of the things that I love the most about their fan base is how loyal they are, how passionate they are.
Yeah.
And they show me a lot of love because of my own loyalty, playing 11 years there and having the opportunity to try, if I wanted to go play somewhere else, go chase a ring. But I was always really driven to bring a championship to Cleveland. And I think a large measure of how good your fan base is like the loyalty when things aren't going well.
Right.
Because it's easy to cheer for a winner.
Right.
It's easy to
Stands
show up.
fill up, bars are
Let's go,
packed,
baby.
like tickets are up. Like,
Yeah, I love cheering for a winner too. But I think it means more to fan bases that are loyal even through the lean years.
Right. Well, that's what I grew up in Cincinnati. I've been in this business for almost 10 years now. And I was a sports reporter covering the team, but the Bengals are my hometown team. So seeing them go to this, like interviewing Joe and Jamar on the field after the game, Zach Taylor coming up and dapping me up, players giving me hugs, acting like I did something to get them to the Super Bowl. Yeah. But when you're around those guys and you see the work they put in and then they finally achieve it, it was a pretty cool emotional moment, not just for them, for me, for the city. I mean, it was a super cool thing. What are you most proud of in your career? Is it, playing all those snaps in a row? Is it being loyal to Cleveland? That's another kind of loaded question, but what are you most proud of in your career?
When I reflect back on my career, I would say the thing I'm the most proud of is just being there 10,363 straight snaps for my teammates. Because as a lineman, I didn't touch the ball other than a few fumble recoveries during my career. So I wasn't scoring points. I wasn't catching passes.
Yeah.
Really all I can do is show up and do my best to block my guy. Be there for the double teams with my guard and my tight end. Try to be there for my quarterback to keep his backside clean. Open up some holes for my running back. And for me, when I see that number, like in the Browns Stadium, they put that number up in their Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
To me, that gives me a lot of pride that I fought through some tough times from lack of winning, injury, just losing and having other guys sit out because the season's over. Don't get hurt. Save yourself for next year.
Right.
But for me, it was important to always be there for my teammates. And I hope that the guys that I played with that are still on the team, the Joel Batonios, the David Njokus, those guys are maybe teaching some of the values, some of the things that I emphasized when I was there as the captain and they were the rookie, that now they are emphasizing to the guys in that locker room right now as the veterans to the rookies.
Turning the page, you're back to living in Wisconsin. You've been out of football for 5 years now. What is life like after football for you? One, you look amazing. I know 1,000 people have told you that, and we'll get into that in a second. But what has life been like mentally after football? Because a lot of guys struggle towards the end of their career, and then once they're out, they don't know what to do. What's it been like for you since?
Yeah, well, it was great talking with the Brown psychologist towards the end of my career when I was kind of struggling with the losing, because we did have some conversations about life after football, because I retired shortly after my 11th season and had built a relationship with the Browns psychologist. And so for me, it was an easy conversation to talk to him about, like, what are the minefields looking like out there for guys that are retired? Because to your point, there's a lot of guys that do struggle, a lot of my teammates. And I feel like I was very proactive talking to my teammates that had retired before me, watching them from afar, trying to see what the pitfalls were, why they kind of ran into issues, and, being there to support them when they needed it, but also asking the questions about, like, what do you miss about football? Why, as a football player, you were grumpy every single day when you walked in the locker room, but now that you're not, like, you're reflecting back in those days like it was the greatest time of your life. And one of the big things that I took away from those guys was a sense of purpose. When you're a football player, you walk in the building every day and you have a very clear sense of purpose. You're trying to win the Super Bowl. So it's very easy. Everything that you organize and you prioritize during your day is kind of, how do I make myself and my team better so we can win a championship? So it's very clear. Even in the offseason, you know what you're trying to do. And when you're not on a football team, you're not playing football anymore, and you're not trying to get back into the NFL. Right. What's your sense of purpose? Like, it's easy to say, well, it's being a father. Yeah. It's being a husband, which is the most important purpose in the world. But how do you concretely do things to move towards the Super Bowl of fatherhood or husbandhood? Like, it's easy to say, well, I improved on my bench press and worked on my fitness and my pass set, so I'm a better player and I'm making strides towards winning the Super Bowl. But, like, as a father or a husband, the success chalk markings on the scoreboard are a lot less clear and defined. Right. So it's more difficult, especially as an analytical person, as a football player, to be able to, like, concretely see what am I doing that's making strides towards who I want to be.
Sure.
And I think also the other part of it is you've identified almost your entire life as an athlete or specifically a football player.
Right.
And that identity is gone the second you retire. And everyone thinks, oh, it's not going to be true. I won a Super Bowl. I'm this person, that person, MVP of this. But the second you're gone, you're the former football player and you're not currently doing it anymore. You're not getting the same perks that you had. You're not getting the same respect that you used to have. But also, like, it's hard for you to come to terms with you're not a football player anymore, because a lot of times careers were cut shorter than they wanted.
Right.
And so a guy is a former football player a lot sooner than they expected. And that's also pretty difficult to kind of wrap your mind around. So the one thing the psychologist told me is, like, you have to treat the end of your football career almost like a death in the family. Like, your football career is dead and you have to find a new identity that fills you up.
Oh, wow.
And I felt really lucky that I kind of stumbled into the media right away, because it didn't make me fully feel like my football identity was dead, because I'm still kind of a football player-ish, or was a football player, where I can use some of the knowledge that I learned from 20 years of playing in my profession. Whereas a guy that starts over and he's going into insurance sales or whatever else, like, it may be hard for him to now be like, well, I'm an insurance salesman, or like, I'm a little
different.
I'm an exterminator or whatever it looks like. Like, it's hard to identify as that new thing, because it'll never be as great as far as the public perception as professional football player.
Right. And kind of piggybacking off that, and I don't want you to share someone's business if you don't want to, but is there a former teammate or a guy that that really did struggle, where you kind of maybe had to assert yourself or be there for? It was hard for you to watch because they weren't dealing with it as good as you were. I mean, you took that step in your final year to see the psychologist and talk about what's next, treat it like a death in the family, and be able to move on. Is there any guy that stands out that really struggled and you tried to be there for, or you had a connection with?
Yeah, I've had a few teammates like that. Surprisingly, just about every teammate that I've had that has retired, you go through it to some extent or another. And as a friend, as a former teammate, I think the best thing we can do is be there for them, let them know that we care about them, let them know that their life is important to us, like what they're doing is important. Yeah. So you just checking in, because sometimes guys have to go through their own twists and turns and adventures to get to a place where they are comfortable, like spilling a little bit more and talking about things and feeling like it's good and it's part of the process to have those deeper, softer conversations that maybe as a football player you were afraid to dive in because you didn't want that label of being soft, or he's not a tough guy.
That car ride we talked about a little bit earlier, would you say that was your darkest day, or did you have something else that maybe kind of was hanging it up the toughest day, or was that car ride the toughest day?
I would say the car ride was the toughest, because when I tore my tricep tendon and then I missed the rest of the season, I kind of knew that because I had a really bad knee, I was probably going to retire. I hadn't let myself think about whether I would or wouldn't, because I kind of knew what the result was going to be. And I didn't think it was fair to my teammates to, in the middle of their season, have the focus be on me. Am I going to retire or not? So I didn't want to think about it. And like I talked about with my yoga background and the meditation and sort of trying to learn how to teach my mind to stay away from certain things and veer towards other things. It helped me in my performance on the football field, but it also helped me off the field, because if I said, like, I don't want to consider whether I'm going to retire or not, and I'm going to leave that thought process and those conversations till after the season, like, I felt like I was pretty good at doing that, because I knew it was the best thing for me and my team.
Since football, like I said, you look great. You were a bigger guy, obviously, playing up front in the trenches. What's the secret? What kind of motivated you to change and make that difference with your body?
Well, I mentioned my knee was kind of why I retired. I've got bone on bone in my knee in a few spots, and that was really what was weighing on my mind my last couple of years, because it was starting to affect my performance, because I couldn't practice, and it was always swollen where I couldn't really walk around on it during the week, and I had to get it drained and shot up every week. So that was part of the low moment that I had in the car ride. To your point, was the losing, my own good performance, but then also the fact that I had this knee that was like rapidly deteriorating, and there was the unknown of how long it's going to hang on. Like, is it going to, in the middle of the season, like give out and I'm going to be just done?
Yeah.
So I think part of that and not having control and knowing when that would happen.
Yeah.
Kind of led partially to it. But yeah, with my knee, I knew that was going to be possibly why I was going to have to retire. And I felt okay about that, right? Because I had always thought about retirement as the next chapter. I didn't always identify only as a football player. And I think for offensive linemen, that can be a little bit easier because we're never the guys that have the spotlight and the glory on us.
You're not the quarterback. You're not the wide receiver where it's
exactly.
I know what you're saying.
So in retirement, we're not trying to replicate that feeling of catching a touchdown pass because we never did.
Right.
So for me, I always thought of a second act as like a father and a husband and a youth coach. And I had all these other things in mind. And so it was just sort of a matter of, I think this is time to move into that second phase and make my family my priority.
What has that been like? I mean, obviously I'm at your house here in Wisconsin and wife answers the door, kids running around upstairs. I mean, is this exactly what you imagined it'd be once you got out of football?
I don't know what I imagined it, but I know that I've got some wonderful kids that are way cooler. Right? 4 kids. They're way cooler than I ever expected, and I definitely want to spend way more time with them than I thought I would.
Right.
Because they're really fun.
Yeah.
Especially when they came out as babies. I was like, you guys aren't that much fun. You guys, I can't take you fishing. I can't take you to football games.
Yeah.
Like, when are we going to be fun? But now they're like in that age that's really fun. And it's really more of a challenge to go away and do work and be away from them because they are pretty awesome.
Do they realize who you are or do they
No,
care?
They don't care. And the funny thing is I got inducted in the Browns Legends Club recently and everyone was asking me about my kids' memories of me playing. And I asked my oldest and she told me the only memory she has of me playing football was her sitting on the concrete floor at First Energy Stadium where the Browns play and eating peanuts. She has zero memory of me like wearing a uniform or playing in the game,
Hall of Fame player
or doing anything.
10,000 snaps. Yeah. Oh my!
So essentially, all 4 of my children have no memory whatsoever of me playing. So it's been really cool to go back, put the jersey on,
see
get
the
on
Browns
the field,
gear, and
see the Browns gear, and prove to them that I did play in the NFL, and you should respect me when I tell you to go to bed.
There's only Pro Bowl jerseys and everything back here.
That's right. Come down here. See, that's me. I know they don't believe it, but that's the guy over there that's going to kick your butt if you don't go to bed right now.
That's great. Let's get into some fun questions here as we wrap things up. Favorite moment of your career?
I think the favorite game of mine was we played this
not the Tom Brady game.
It wasn't the Tom Brady game. It was maybe the other Tom Brady game. The one time we beat him with Colt McCoy as our quarterback at home. Actually my favorite game was my rookie year. We beat the Buffalo Bills 8-0 in a driving blizzard. It was in December.
That's such a Buffalo Cleveland score.
It was awesome, right? Everything was just perfect, right? We got 7 inches of snow between the time that we finished warmups and went into the locker room that we came out like 15 minutes later.
Is this Cleveland or Buffalo?
Cleveland. Oh. It was a legit whiteout. It was like being a kid, and it reminded me of when I was a child, and we would go outside during Christmas break and we'd play in the snowbanks. We'd play football in the snowbanks. And it was so much fun, right? There was like nothing to lose. It was just fun diving in the snow. And that's what it felt like because especially as a rookie, there's a lot of stress on everything you do, making sure you're perfect and you do everything exactly right. And of course you don't do a lot of stuff right because you're a rookie. But going out and playing in the snow, I felt like you could play free because there was nothing holding you back. It was just like being a kid again. Yeah. And we ended up winning. We had 2 field goals and a safety. It kept us in the playoff race that year, which we ended up 10-6, didn't make the playoffs, but it was the best season that I had. And so that memory is probably my fondest memory from my career.
Favorite teammate and why? I know I'm putting you on the spot for just one.
And I had a lot of great teammates. My best friend from my playing days is Alex Mack. He was my center. I think I played with him the longest, but I always appreciated him because he was so smart. Yeah. He was so focused. He played so hard. We called him the golden retriever because he was just like the guy that wanted to please the coach. Whatever it was, he was, yes, coach, I'll do it. And he was the guy I counted on when he was my center for a large majority of my career because he makes the calls. He makes sure everybody's on the same page. He makes sure the snap count is getting off on time so I can get off and do my job. And we were great friends off the field. We travel together, even now in retirement, like to go overseas and we like to eat and drink and have a good time. So, he's definitely probably my favorite teammate.
That's awesome. And you mentioned drinking. I saw at your bar behind me. There's a beer with your face on
That's
it.
right.
What is? Can you tell me
right.
about that?
So Great Lakes Brewing,
Yeah.
the famous microbrew in Cleveland. They make a bunch of great award-winning brews.
We get some of them down to Cincinnati too.
They
so
sent a few down to Cincinnati. Dortmunder Gold is probably their most favorite, and then Christmas Ale is their seasonal that everyone loves. But the CEO actually used to live next door to me, and he would come over and we'd drink beer when I was playing. But as a player, you're not allowed to rep alcohol brands. So when I retired, he said,
back then you weren't, because now you can.
You can? Oh, maybe they changed it.
It's got. I mean, like good friend Sam Hubbard plays for the Bengals. He's got, I think, Miller Lite now is his.
Oh, awesome.
So the world evolved a little bit.
That's
NIL,
right.
alcohol, the
and
NFL.
alcohol.
Yeah.
Perfect. What else do you need?
Yeah.
So he came over and he was like, now that you're retired, what do you think about brewing a beer? And I was like,
say less.
yes. Where do I sign up? So we went over there early one morning to the brew pub with the two brewmasters and tried like 30 beers at 8 in the morning. And I told them what I liked and didn't like about every beer. And the brewmaster just came up with 73 Kolsch beer, which is a traditional Kolsch style beer. And the very first vat that they made, I tasted it and I was like, that's awesome. Done.
That's amazing.
I think they hit the balance between drinkability and flavor.
Yeah.
Because we wanted it to be a tailgate beer. We wanted it to be a fall beer. So have a little bit more flavor like an Oktoberfest.
Yeah.
But not be so much that if you drink a sixer at a tailgate, you're not making it into the game.
Right.
So I think it hit that, and it's been cool. I think we've got like 4 years or so of doing it with Great Lakes.
So Hall of Fame and then having your own beers below it, I think.
Yeah, neck and neck.
Yeah. Hopefully you don't slap me for asking this question. Can you name every quarterback you played with?
No, that's the good answer because I've tried before. And even after doing it a few times, they still have to feed me a few of the names because the middle part of my career, we were having like 3 or 4 quarterbacks every year.
Honestly, watching it from afar in Cincinnati was wild.
Yeah. And I'm so sorry to all those guys. I love all of them. Great teammates, but I just can't remember all of them.
Did you ever see like that very popular meme, I'm sure you have, with all the names in the back of the jersey?
Oh, yeah. It's like a cape now. There's like 30 plus since 99.
Let's get into this year's Browns team. It's early in the season while we're recording this. This isn't going to come out until November, but just this team, what excites you about them? It does seem like there's a new chapter in the Browns organization.
Yeah. Well, just from a fan's perspective, it's a fun team to cheer for because it's a lot of guys that are selfless. And I think there's something to be said about guys that have great personalities and like the center of attention, which is cool. It's fun. You know, they make for little cool social media hits.
Right.
But when it's my team, I love having the guys like Nick Chubb and the Myles Garrett, the guys that are just quiet workers that go about their business. They give their all every single day. And as a former player, I respect that about them.
Yeah.
And I would have loved to have teammates like that. Because you know exactly who you're going to get from that person every single day. And as a fan, I think you can identify with a person that seems to love what they do.
Sure.
And they give everything they have every single day. And, oh, by the way, they're like all pros.
Yeah, really good at football. That helps too.
Yeah.
Do you feel like this is a team that can compete? I mean, we talked about you kind of realizing later in your career that, all right, we're probably not going to compete for a Super Bowl. Do you feel like this is a playoff contender year in and year out now in Cleveland?
I think it is because they've got a lot of really, really good pieces. It actually reminds me a little bit of the Bengals defense last year.
Sure.
It was a bunch of guys that were really good, but sort of unheralded. And it gave them a flexibility in scheme, which today's NFL, especially in the playoffs, it's a lot about matchups. It's like, this team can't stop the run. This team's good at running the ball. Well, this week, that team smokes the team that can't stop the run. And then the next week they get smoked because the other team does something that they did well. Because it's all about matchups. But if you have flexibility, that gives you a tremendous advantage, especially going through the playoffs where, as we know, it's loser leave town. So I think the Browns offense, they're very dynamic. They can do a lot of different things. It makes them really tough to defend, especially that running game with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. And they've got a top 5 defense. They haven't played like it at the beginning of the season necessarily, but the talent is there. And I think once they get on the same page, it's going to be a really difficult defense because they've got just loads of talent in the secondary. So they can cover a lot of these AFC teams that have great receivers.
Well, Del Pitt, Greedy, I covered them when they were at LSU, so I know how aggressive and good they are. Last two questions. One, what do you do when you watch a Browns game now? Are you sitting here in the basement in the man cave watching on the TVs with the family? Or are you out at a bar? Or how many games do you try to go to? What's it like with you?
Yeah, so I usually like watching games either like in my house or somewhere where not a lot of people are going to bug me.
Right.
Because I want to watch the game because I really like football. Like, especially
it's also
my
personal
team.
To you.
It's very personal. When I go to Badger games, it's a little bit more social. I mean, I like watching the game. There's no doubt. But with Browns games, I don't even really drink a lot. Like I was at a game recently and we were up in the suites and, it's unlimited beer and food and stuff. And I didn't have any of it. I just wanted to sit there and watch, and I think that's probably different than a lot of fans.
Sure.
But it's just a little more important to me. And I really just enjoy the art of watching the game of football and the strategy within the game. So if I'm there, I don't want anybody bothering me. And if I'm here, like my son, a couple of my girls are curled up on the couch with me and they might ask a few questions, but they're pretty smart about their football game too. And so it's focusing on what's happening on the field.
Well, it sounds like dad mode might need to go in effect here in just a second. The house is kids are getting a little excited here in the afternoon. Last thing I'll ask, advice for a young athlete, a young football player that's wanting to do what you did, play over a decade in the NFL. You're going to be a Hall of Famer one day. You're in the Browns Legends Club. A guy that competed at the highest level, had success. What would be your biggest piece of advice to someone that wants to do what you did?
Simply, I would just say be great at the things that take no talent, because that can be the difference between you and the next guy. Be on time, pay attention, work hard. Like if you can do those things and you can focus on that, you can overcome any deficiencies that you have with your own athleticism or your own speed or power or things like that. Because so many times guys aren't willing to do those easy little things that take no talent.
Great answer. Great interview. I appreciate it. And we might have to get into some of these beers at some point.
Let's go, baby. We got plenty.
We'll see you guys next time here on The Mental Game.
And I can't thank Joe enough for inviting me out to his house in Madison, Wisconsin. It was an 8-hour drive from Cincinnati, Ohio. But as you just watch and listen to the podcast episode, it was well worth it. A great conversation with him about football, things on and off the field, his own mental health, life after the NFL. Just a great episode. So once again, thank you, Joe Thomas, for opening up with me right here on The Mental Game. Next week, another big football guest, NFL sideline reporter Kaylee Hartung. You see her every Thursday night on Amazon Prime for the NFL's Thursday Night Football game. She joins me right back here on The Mental Game. We talk about her life as a woman in sports, also living out her dream on the NFL sidelines. Also, we talk about some of the obstacles she had to overcome early in her life, including losing her dad in a plane crash while she was a child. All of that and much, much more next week, right back here on The Mental Game.